Nice use of proxemics. Oh, yeah, thank you. Nice use of proxemics. And do I have your, Sarah, do I have your outline?
I laid it on your desk.
Oh, good. Oh, right in front of me. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. So, whenever Bobby is ready.
So according to a study by the Smithsonian Institute, specifically Jimmy Scholes, who's a researcher at the Smithsonian Institute, an activity that we do for at least, or 80% of this class does, according to the audience analysis, does for at least an hour a day, is designed specifically to slow you down. This is typing. So today I want to talk about the history of the keyboard that we use, and I want to talk about specifically 2 points. One, I want to talk about the invention of the typewriter and with it the keyboard. And then I also want to talk about how the keyboard came to be what it is today. So first of all, the keyboard, or the typewriter. The typewriter was invented originally to help blind people. They were called blind writers. And we don't have models or of the first blind writer, but this was the first typewriter that was ever mass-produced. It was called a ball typewriter, and it was incredibly inefficient. If you could type 20 words a minute on this typewriter, you were doing really well. But what this typewriter did do well is that it inspired a whole bunch of men to start innovating. And so one of these men was Charles Latham Scholes. And this is my first point. Charles Latham Scholes invented the typewriter that we know today. This typewriter is the one that you guys can think of. It's the first one. This is actually a picture of his patent. Now, if you see here, you might recognize that this is the same keyboard that we use today. It's called the QWERTY keyboard. Now, the QWERTY keyboard was designed, and there's a little bit of debate about that. The first reason was brought up in a paper by 2 researchers out of the Kyoto University, and their names are Koichi Oyosuka and Makoto Oyosuka. And what they said was that the QWERTY was specifically designed to help telegraph operators. The telegraph operators were typing, and they were trying to figure out what the dots and the dashes represented so they could type these words out. So for instance, S is ... in the Morse code at the time, but Z is ... pause ... And so what a typist could do is that he could hover his finger between the S and the Z, which is very close in a QWERTY keyboard, and so he could wait for that last pause if it came and he could type. The other theory is from the Smithsonian, and this is one that's a little bit more prevalent and what people think has actually happened. So these things on a typewriter are called type bars, and what they do is they go up and they hit the piece of paper to make the letters. Now, when Scholes was trying to sell his invention to businesses, it needed to be practical. It needed to have some reason. And what he was finding was that these type bars were jamming because the letters that were close together would stick. So for instance, TH. If TH was close together, if they hit it, the bars would stick. And so what the theory is that Scholes separated the keys that are used most commonly to slow typists down. And so that way, the type bars wouldn't stick and Scholes could sell his product. And Scholes was actually incredibly successful in selling this product. What he did was that he sold it to another company, and this is to my next point. So once he invented this typewriter, he sold it to the company Remington. Now Remington is the gun maker you probably are all familiar with, but they also, at the time, made typewriters. And Remington did something that was really, really ingenious at the time, and it was pretty novel. What they did was that they not only sold the typewriters, they sold training for the typewriters. And so secretaries would come and they would learn how to type on a Remington typewriter. And so that way, when they went into the workforce, these secretaries and their employers would pay for Remington typewriters, would pay for Remington reams of ink, would pay for Remington training for other employees because that was the things that their employees were trained on. They were trained on the Remington, and they didn't want to slow them down once they got into the workforce. And so Remington made a lot of money selling these typewriters, and they became incredibly popular. Now what Remington and what Shoals would have never thought of are the computers that we use today. And what happened is that when the computer was invented, there was no input. You are all familiar with the phrase a computer bug. Well, at the time, the computers were so big that bugs were actually real. They were computer bugs. And so when the input section of a keyboard came into computers, the keyboard was the most obvious choice from the typewriter. And so the keyboard turned into what it was today. So this keyboard is the latest and greatest in the keyboards, and it's the same technology that Shoals use today. And so I think it's a little bit interesting that Shoals invented this keyboard almost 200 years ago in 1878. He patented it, and we still use the exact same system today. And my question to you is whether or not it was used for either Morse code transcription or because the type bars were jamming, why are we using it today?
Nice job. And so